Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash, Barakatam. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to Ya'akim out there pushing this word in truth and sincerity. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Raya with another video, and I'm going to start it off with Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I'm going to read verse 1 and verse 8. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Verse 8, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And you don't have to be a spiritual person to see that we're clearly in a time of war and a time of hate. Racial tensions are building up, civil unrest is brewing over into a civil war. All these economies around the world are on the fritz. There's wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilences, and earthquakes, which is all going to culminate into a nuclear confrontation, which is going to lead to America, also known as Babylon the Great in the scriptures, being destroyed from sea to shining sea. And there's nothing that can be done to avert that, no peace treaties or what have you, because that's a major part of prophecy. I'm going to go to my first article on BBC.com titled, Russia Nuclear Treaty, Gorbachev warns Trump plan will undermine disarmament. Former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev says U.S. President Trump's plan to withdraw from a key Cold War nuclear weapons treaty is a reversal of efforts to achieve nuclear disarmament. Mr. Gorbachev, who signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces or INF treaty with President Reagan in 1987, questioned the plan's intelligence. Mr. Trump said Russia had been violating the INF for many years. Russia has condemned the plans and threatened to retaliate. The Kremlin said Vladimir Putin would be seeking an explanation from visiting U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton. Germany was the first U.S. ally to criticize the move, with Foreign Minister Heiko Maas urging Washington to consider the consequences both for Europe and for future disarmament efforts. And with the U.S. continually shitting on its European allies, that's going to lead to the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 17, verse 16, where the horns on the beast, which is speaking of the European Union, which Germany is a part of, is going to turn against that whore that rides upon the beast, which is the United States, and shoot their nuclear missiles onto it. The INF banned ground-launched medium-range missiles with a range of between 500 and 5,500 kilometers, or 310 to 3,400 miles. It was signed near the end of the Cold War, a period of relations between the U.S. and the Soviet Union from 1945 to 1989, marked by intense international tension and overshadowed by the threat of nuclear conflict. And the reason nothing major happened during the Cold War is because the elect of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai hadn't been sealed. But during this time, if the elect haven't been sealed, then they're pretty damn close to it, because as you can see, these events are speeding up, and also the days are being shortened for the elect's sake. It's almost showtime. In the past 5 decades, the U.S. and Russia have signed a range of joint agreements to limit and reduce their substantial nuclear arsenals. I'm going to skip this and go down to here. This would be a very, very dangerous step that I'm sure not only will not be comprehended by the international community, but will provoke serious condemnation, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov said. The treaty is significant for international security and security in the sphere of nuclear arms for the maintenance of strategic stability, he told state news agency TASS. The minister also told the news agency RIA Novosti that if the U.S. continued to behave clumsily and crudely and backed out of the international agreement, then we will have no choice but to undertake retaliatory measures, including involving military technology. But we would not want to get to this stage, he added, but it will get to that stage because it's a major part of prophecy and we're in a time of war and hate. A significant step back. Concern about Russia's development and deployment of a missile system that breaches the INF treaty predates the Trump administration, but the president's decision to walk away from the agreement marks a significant setback for arms control. And I don't doubt that the Russians have breached treaties here and there, because the Russians, as well as these other nations, know you can't trust the United States. They have a long history of breaking treaties. Just look at the Native Americans in the past and look at their allies today, as well as other events. You had Saddam Hussein, who used to be an ally of the U.S., and when the U.S. was done with him, look what happened. They started the war with Iraq that overthrew his government. And you can't forget Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. He agreed to give up his nukes, and after that, his country was destroyed in a so-called civil war, which has led to Libya being turned into a failed state, all thanks to the United States and NATO. Many experts believe that negotiations should have continued to try to bring the Russians back into compliance. It is, they fear, part of the wider unraveling of the whole system of arms control treaties that helped to curb strategic competition during the Cold War. Other factors, too, may have played into President Trump's decision. This was a bilateral treaty between Washington and Moscow. China was free to develop and deploy intermediate-range nuclear missiles. Some in the Trump administration feel that the INF Treaty places them at a growing disadvantage in their developing strategic rivalry with Beijing. Has Russia breached the treaty? The U.S. insists the Russians have. In breach of the deal, developed a new medium-range missile called the Novitar 9M729, known to NATO as the SSC-8. And you can best believe that these medium-range missiles are going to be nuclear-tipped and deployed onto the United States. It would enable Russia to launch a nuclear strike at NATO countries at very short notice. Russia has said little about its new missile other than to deny that it is a breach of the agreement. Analysts say Russia sees such weapons as a cheaper alternative to conventional forces. And of course the Russians are developing new missiles because they know that even though the U.S. is so-called in treaties, that they're developing weapons behind the scenes as well, so these Russians don't want to be unprepared. The New York Times reported on Friday the U.S. was considering withdrawing from the treaty in a bid to counter China's expanding military presence in the Western Pacific. China was not a signatory of the deal, allowing it to develop medium-range missiles without restraint. The last time the U.S. withdrew from a major arms treaty was in 2002. There you go again, the United States breaking another treaty. When President George W. Bush pulled the U.S. out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, which banned weapons designed to counter ballistic nuclear missiles. His administration's move to set up a missile shield in Europe alarmed the Kremlin and was scrapped by the Obama administration in 2009. It was replaced by a modified defense system in 2016. So as you brothers can see, we're getting closer and closer to the end game. Now I'm going to go to my next article on ZeroHedge.com titled, Putin Announces New Hypersonic Weapon Will Be Deployed in Months. These other heathen nations aren't playing around. They're in the right spirit. They know that we're entering into a time of hate and war. It's just you dildo-head Americans, well, the majority of you at least, that think everything's peaches and cream, that we're in a time of love and peace, and that everything's going to be good for the rest of your lives, but y'all are sadly mistaken. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Thursday that Moscow would deploy new avant-garde hypersonic glider warheads, which will be eventually nuclear-tipped in the coming months, adding that Russia's hypersonic program is the most advanced in the world, according to a new report from the Financial Times. We are improving our attack systems in response to the construction of a missile defense system by the United States. Some of them are already in service, and some will be supplied in the near future, said Putin, who was speaking at the Valdai Discussion Club in the Black Sea resort of Sochi Thursday, adding that Moscow's hypersonic weapons program was well ahead of China and the U.S. The avant-garde system will be deployed in the next few months. It is a fact of life that we are ahead of all our partners and competitors in the sphere of high-precision hypersonic weapons, he said. No one else has that in that sense. We feel very comfortable, very safe. This latest revelation comes 7 months after Putin shocked Russia's political elite at the annual Russian State of the Union address in March by claiming Moscow had developed new nuclear weapons that cannot be shot down by U.S. anti-ballistic missile defenses. And the reason for that is because Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai put it on the scientists who made those missiles to make them so advanced that they can't be shot down by a U.S. anti-ballistic missiles defenses. And also, when those missiles are shot, Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai's spirit's going to be on them so they don't miss their targets. The missiles, Putin said, are capable of striking almost any point on Earth while traveling at hypersonic speeds. And what sounded like an implicit threat to the West, which it was, Putin also said back in March that Russia had repeatedly warned Washington not to go ahead with anti-missile systems that Moscow fears could erode its nuclear deterrent. However, nobody listened to us. Listen now, he said, to a loud ovation from the crowd of legislators, officials, and dignitaries. Now I'm going to go to a few more precepts to not only show that there's going to be a nuclear destruction, but that nuclear missiles are biblical. This is Revelation chapter 9. I'm going to read verse 12 through 19. Verse 12. One woe or destruction is past, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. And that first woe was World War I, while the two woes hereafter is speaking of World War II and World War III respectively. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before the Most High, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And that's speaking of that Middle East region where the battle of the valley of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat means Yahweh Shaphat, is going to take place. And those angels are just waiting to get the orders to release that total destruction, which is going to lead to the battle of Armageddon. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of horsemen were 200,000,000, and I heard the number of them, and that 200,000,000 means 200 million. And that army of horsemen is speaking of those nuclear missiles, because America's going to get hit with 200 million nuclear missiles, because you got to remember, one warhead has several smaller warheads in it. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone. That's speaking of that steel plating on those missiles. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, those nuclear warheads. And out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone, that nuclear destruction. By these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. And that third part of men is mainly referring to you Edomites, because in the scriptures there are three sons. They're the sons of God, which are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, or the true children of Israel. The sons of men, which are these other heathen nations, such as the so-called Chinese, Japanese, Arabs, what have you. And the sons of the wicked, which you Edomites are so-called white people. And a lot of you Europeans and NATO are going to get destroyed in this coming destruction. And all of you American Edomites are going to get destroyed, because as I keep saying, nuclear missiles are going to destroy the United States from sea to shining sea. But that doesn't mean you other heathens are exempt from this as well, because missiles are going to be getting shot back and forth. So you heathens in other countries are going to feel this pain as well. For their power is in their mouth, that nuclear destruction, and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. And that tails like unto serpents is speaking of that smoke stream from those rocket boosters on the back of the missiles. And now I'm going to close it out with Jeremiah chapter 50 verse 9. For lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon, the United States, an assembly of great nations from the north country. And that north country refers to Russia. And that assembly of great nations refers to its allies, such as China, Iran, North Korea, as well as the allies of the United States, which are going to turn against it, such as countries in NATO, Germany, France, South Korea, Japan, what have you. And they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. And those arrows also refer to those nuclear missiles, and they won't return in vain, because they're not going to miss their target when they're shot onto Babylon the Great. So with this video, I hope you sincere Akim were edified. Pray, fast, do whatever need be not to be taken out of this truth, because we're at the end. So, again, I hope you were edified. I'm going to say a Baba Ball, Kwam Yasharala. Until next time, Shalom.